4. The new conditions of trade union struggle. The World War created conditions which further impede the struggle of the trade unions and substantially lower even the chances of obtaining practical results which it had prior to the war. First of all, it nullified most of the previous gains in the working conditions of all the belligerent, and even of neutral nations. Everywhere wages far from correspond to the colossal rise in the cost of living. There is a precipice between the nominal and the real wage, i.e. its actual purchasing power. There is an unprecedented rise in the price of the necessities of life and a shortage of them, an acute housing crisis and unprecedented misery for the working masses in the defeated as well as in the victorious countries. Moreover, the war radically upset all economic life. For 4 years, almost 45 million people, instead of producing goods, were engaged in a terrible holocaust of destruction. More than 20 million producers of goods left their lives on the battlefields or were disabled, i.e. deprived of their former capacity for work. Flourishing regions in the world were devastated. All reserves of raw materials and foods were swallowed up by the greedy war monster. Vast spaces of land remained uncultivated. 3/4 of the farm animals were killed. The workers who returned from the battlefields are physically exhausted and morally upset. Trade has been completely disorganized. The former relations between the different economic and industrial regions for the exchange of raw materials and finished goods have been discontinued. The means of communication, railroad, shipping and other communications have been worn out, etc. As a result of this disorganization of economic life, many branches of industry today are at a standstill, and others have altogether ceased to function. Mass unemployment is assuming unprecedented proportions in all countries of the world. Today, in the period of liquidation of the World War, which in effect is no liquidation at all but merely a passing over of the war into another stage, into the stage of all imperialist war against the rising international proletarian revolution, capitalism has proved incapable of securing peace among nations, of restoring production and securing the elementary survival of the masses. Crushed by the weight of its insoluble internal contradictions, its only concern now is to save itself from the revolution, resorting for this purpose to civil war and thereby fanning still further the chaos in production and economic fife and infinitely increasing the sufferings of its own people. On the other hand, the World War irretrievably ushered in the epoch of the international proletarian revolution. We see its beginning flow in Soviet Russia. The revolutionary movements which have already started in Germany, Austria and Hungary, as well as the intensified undercurrents in Italy, France and Great Britain, whose echo reaches our ears from time to time, testify to its early spread to other countries as well. Anarchy in economic life, disorganization in production accompanied by mass unemployment and misery are still further heightened by the Civil War, whereby the bourgeoisie is trying in vain to retain its shaken supremacy. There are no longer any prospects for a return to pre-war conditions. The war itself accelerated and revealed a complete bankruptcy of the capitalist system of production and trade, of social organization and state government. History now confronts working mankind with the dilemma, either to pass over to new forms of production and social organization or to perish under the regime of imperialist barbarity. The restoration of economic life today is possible only along socialist lines, i.e. without the capitalists and against them. But precisely under these new conditions, the efforts of the trade unions to improve the conditions of the workers even back to the pre-war level have become quite hopeless and helpless. Within the framework of the capitalist system this is excluded. For its attainment, the first condition to break and go beyond this framework. And indeed, how will the trade unions be able to obtain the improvements needed by the workers when economic life today is so upset, when there is such mass unemployment and when the strong and extremely obdurate financial capitalists, whom the war even in our small backward country, raised to the position of absolute rulers and lords in economic life, are inclined to see in every movement for higher wages and shorter working hours a revolutionary action, aimed directly at the overthrow of capitalist rule? What labor laws of a nature to expand and consolidate the gains of the trade union struggle could be enacted by the present-day bourgeois state, which is writhing under billions of war debts and is financially bankrupt? It is precisely these peculiar conditions in the trade union struggle at the present-day imperialist stage of capitalism which confront the proletariat and, in particular, its trade unions with the immediate task of doing away with the capitalist system and the ensuing exploitation of labor. The moment is setting in when, instead of endeavoring through the trade union struggle slowly and gradually to improve the workers' condition within the limits of capitalist production, production itself has to pass into the hands of the proletariat so as to be organized not for capitalist profit and in favor of a minority, as it is today, but to meet the needs of the working majority and for the general prosperity of those who work. 5. The struggle for political power. But it is precisely for this reason that at the present historical moment the struggle for political power by the proletariat comes to the fore, and all other efforts and tasks of the workers' organizations, including the trade unions, must be coordinated with this struggle and be completely subordinated to it. For the replacement of one social and production system by another is possible only by means of political power. The abolition of capitalist exploitation, which is today the immediate task of the trade unions, can be achieved only if the proletariat wrests power from the hands of the ruling bourgeoisie and establishes a proletarian dictatorship exercised by the workers' councils. But if the strike is the strongest weapon of the trade unions for gaining improvements in production, now, when it is a question of seizing political power and proceeding to a radical reconstruction of production and society, not the strike, even in the form of a mass political strike, will settle the issue, but the proletarian revolution. Instead of a struggle with hands crossed by different groups and the masses of workers, we have to have a struggle waged by the whole proletariat, which it will terminate with arms in hand. To rally the masses, to educate and prepare them for this struggle, while they themselves take a most active part in it under the leadership of the Communist Party, is today the foremost task of the trade unions, if they wish to remain true to the interests of the proletariat and to their own role of class proletarian organizations. 6. Trade union neutrality. In this factual and historical state of affairs, is it necessary to prove in detail that there is no room today for any so-called political neutrality, the neutrality of the trade unions with regard to political parties and political struggles? Trade union neutrality has always been a purely bourgeois idea. Under the guise of political neutrality, the bourgeoisie and its agents in the workers' movement, the right-wing socialists and the various workers' friends and social reformers have attempted to detach the trade unions from the class struggle of the proletariat and turn them into tools for the maintenance of capitalist rule. In fact, never and in no country have the trade unions been neutral. The whole history of the workers' movement bears this out. The trade unions have always either remained true to the proletarian cause and have resolutely fought against capitalism, taking part in some way or other in the political struggles in favor of the proletariat, or have directly or indirectly, in one form or another, been at the service of the bourgeoisie, letting the bourgeois parties use them in their internecine struggles for the plums derived from power, and often even in their fight against the emancipatory movement of the proletariat itself. What in fact the neutrality of the trade unions amounts to was best seen during the World War, when the neutral and free trade unions in Germany, France, Great Britain and America committed their treason towards the cause of proletarian liberation, by taking part with might and main in the bellicose imperialist policy of their own capitalist classes. And indeed, call the trade unions be neutral in the struggle between labor and capital, in which by their very nature they are directly involved. Still less is it possible today, when class contradictions have reached their peak, when the bourgeoisie and the proletariat are pitted against each other as class against class, when the period of the International Proletarian Revolution has been ushered in, to speak about trade union neutrality. For the trade unions to be neutral today towards the political class party of the proletariat means for them to be dependent on the bourgeoisie and to be serving some of bourgeois parties. For the trade unions to be neutral to the workers' revolution which is being implemented means that they will be helping the bourgeois counter-revolution. Either with labor, against capital, or with capital against labor. Either on the side of the revolution, or entire camp of the counter-revolution. There is no middle road. And in this connection the form in which this takes place is of absolutely no significance. What counts is the essence of the matter. The fact that certain trade unions are formally considered as neutral and independent means absolutely nothing. In fact, they cannot be such, and will inevitably go either to the one or to the other side, to the one or to the other of the two fighting camps. The historical development of the proletarian class struggle has not only refuted all bourgeois fallacies about trade union neutrality and independence towards the political organization and struggle of the proletariat, but also imposes today a still closer unity between the trade unions and the Communist Party, a complete organic unity between the professional and political struggles of the proletariat for the overthrow of capitalism, the setting up of a proletarian dictatorship and the achievement of communism. 7. The new tasks of the trade unions. The example set to us by Soviet Russia, where the proletariat has now been exercising its dictatorship for a year and a half and is implementing the country's socialist reconstruction, has shown clearly that the trade unions do not end their historical role and do not cease to exist even when the proletariat has succeeded, through its revolution, in seizing political power. On the contrary, precisely during this transitional period of proletarian dictatorship, from the overthrow of the bourgeoisie to the achievement of communism, the trade unions are called upon to play a no less important role. Of course, their role now is profoundly different from what they were doing in the period of capitalist production and under bourgeois rule. Here they cease to be organizations of the proletariat against capitalist exploitation, because the capitalists have been removed from production or have been rendered absolutely harmless under the regime of proletarian dictatorship. True, during this transitional period the trade unions will again continue to defend the workers, but no longer through strikes but through the organized influence of Soviet power. Together with the proletariat, the trade unions themselves, as it were, have come to power, i.e. become part of the government, organs of Soviet government. The trade unions will further have to organize the control and distribution of the workforce in the different branches of production, under the general plan worked out by the Soviet government for the whole nation's economy. In agreement with the Soviet economic bodies, tile trade unions will be settling questions referring to the wages and conditions of workers in the different enterprises, will maintain labor discipline in them and work for a maximum increase in labor productivity. The elaboration of the laws, the fixing of working hours, wages, hygienic working conditions, against employment accidents, sickness, old age, etc., as well as the application of these laws will be another important function of the trade unions. Theirs will also be the task of taking care of general and professional education, necessary for the training of a numerous workers' technical intelligentsia, without which neither the complete regulation of production, nor its nationalization and subsequent organization along socialist lines is conceivable. And, most important of all, the trade unions will be charged with the task of organizing the workers' control over production which will exist until complete socialization is achieved, and of taking into their own hands, as organs of Soviet rule, in conjunction with the other economic bodies, tile organization and management of production in the country's entire economic life. After the conquest of political power by the proletariat, the trade unions will transfer the center of their activity to the sphere of the organization of economic life. They will have to prepare the proletariat for the role of organizer of production in the transition from private capitalist monopoly to state monopoly, and from the latter to the socialist organization of economic life and to complete communism. It will be no exaggeration if we say that without the accomplishment of these exceedingly important tasks on the part of trade unions, neither the complete nor lasting triumph of the workers' revolution is possible, nor the achievement of communism. 8. Conclusion. The functions of the trade unions prior to the revolution, during the revolution, as well as afterwards during the period of proletarian dictatorship, so important and so complex, imperatively demand that the Bulgarian trade unions become genuine mass organizations in composition and in their ties with the broad workers' masses, restoring the complete trade union unity, and that these masses being firmly welded together, deeply imbued with the ideas and spirit of communism, be fully prepared for the communist revolution and the organized construction of life in a new society. Our road is indeed not a smooth one. We are still faced with many hard tests. The great cause to the service of which we have voluntarily dedicated ourselves, however, deserves the utmost efforts and sacrifices on our part. Let us, therefore, make them without any hesitation, profoundly convinced of the inevitable triumph of the international proletarian revolution and of the fact that all mankind will one day be basking in the sun of communism, which is already shining in the east, quite close to Lis, over vast Russia peopled with many millions of men, with its wonderful purple rays calling to a new life.